Day 206 to 9:15 a.m. Base of Mount Madia as Central Panay Mountain Range, Panay Island, Philippines. The aura of death paired with the non-blinding light vanished. The beautiful woman in a black dress emerged. Her figure, however, was ghostly. The people could see through her body. But that was the least of concern at the moment. Everyone was, without a doubt, surprised when the Diwata called the woman that appeared mother. No one would expect such a development, not even Mark, who called upon the woman. Silam. The woman replied to the black-dressed Diwata, I never thought that you were still in this place. Mother. You really are mother. The Diwata said, filled with respect and longing. If not for the fact she was wary of Mark's group, she would have run towards the woman and kneeled in front of her. But despite the reunion, there was barely any emotion on the woman's face. Instead, she turned to Mark with an exasperated glare. And you? Aren't you a rude one, calling me out without prior notice? Mark shrugged. He returned the glare with a questioning stare. The time you can appear is also limited, right? Mark asked. You're not the only one conserving resources here. What I used to call you is something even Bathala deemed precious. In the first place, we came here because of your suggestion. And we are now being blocked by your worshipper. Or maybe, daughter. I don't think any story, legend, or myth about you mentioned anything about her, however. With Mark's reasoning, the woman could only stare at him silently. As for the last part of what he said, the woman explained. It won't be surprising that even if you seem knowledgeable about us, you never heard of Silam. Besides, I only had one daughter, and it is Litigat. As for Silam, like the Tamawas, she is one of the creations made under my supervision. But as her entirety is made of my aura and energy, she sees me as her mother. Not like I disliked it considering what happened. Mark could only give an empathetic stare at the woman. After all, the story of the Visayan gods was quite chaotic. This woman with deathly aura was no other than the Visayan goddess of the underworld, Magwayan. She was called here using the artifact of the Tamawas. The Mark of the King, after all, it was the only item she left that could connect her to Earth. Mark borrowed the artifact from Pephile, which the latter did not hesitate to give. Pephile never wanted this item which determines who the king of his race was. However, since it was their creator's command for him to take it, he brought it with him. Even so, he felt that it was a shackle than a treasure. That was why when Mark asked to borrow it, he gave it immediately. As for why Mark borrowed it, it was because of their destination, the Kahilwayan. If they needed a guide, the Visayan goddess of the underworld would be the best they would be able to find. After all, the ruler of Kahilwayan was her late husband. Even so, Magwayan did not expect Mark to call her without warning. In the first place, such a thing was supposed to be impossible. Despite being a medium to communicate with her, the Mark of the King needed a large amount of energy to function. It needed at least decades of dormancy, and that was why Magwayan could only communicate with the kings of Tamawas from time to time. From the last time that Magwayan used the Mark of the King as a medium, only a bit more than a month had passed. It was when Mark and the Eyes followed Pephile into the Chamber of Kings in the ancestral mansion of the Tamawas. Yet, here she was, called by Mark. Well, Mark did spend something. Mark had to use one of the empty, mental crystals. He had to fill the Mark of the King with enough energy to call the goddess of the underworld. And Mark was not wrong with his words. Bathala deemed the smaller, attributed mental crystals precious, not to mention the larger non-attributed ones. Even Elia and Shemetris had the same view towards Mark's crystals. Unfortunately, the Mark of the King would not absorb any crystal other than the non-attributed ones. Anyway, can you tell them to let us pass? Mark asked Magwayan. You're the one who suggested that we should go find Kahilwayan, after all. And yet, a follower of yours is leading the races to block us. You wouldn't want us to fight them, right? That request of Mark made Magwayan look at Mark's group. Mark aside, her eyes locked onto Shemetris and even May with a slight frown. It was clear that she could assess Mark's group with one glance, knowing which ones of Mark's group pose the worst threat. "What a unique combination of people," Magwayan said as she retracted her stare. "But it is indeed better for Silam not to fight with your people." Magwayan looked at Silam, panning her eyes across the army of magical races. Each member felt cold as the eyes of the goddess fell unto them. It was not even for a whole second, and her gaze only passed them by. "Silam." Magwayan called out. "Yes, mother." Silam replied. This time, although she still did not approach Magwayan, she knelt down. "I believe you heard our conversation. Retreat and let them pass through," Magwayan commanded. "But, mother," of course, the black-dressed Dewata would show some hesitation. After all, Mark's group was mainly composed of demons. They were the mortal enemies of servants of non-demonic and non-evil gods. "Do not fret," Magwayan spoke. "I am the one who sent them to seek the remains of Kahilwayan." "But why, mother?" Silam asked. "Is it not the abode of the Supreme Sky God? No one has been able to enter it since the Supreme Sky God perished and his deities vanished. I have been guarding its passage all this time, not letting anyone desecrate the sacred abode. Why would Mother let filthy demons step inside it?" "So, you can reason with me, now." Magwayan stared at Silam. "Back then, you would only follow my words without question." "That is." Silam was unable to respond. She indeed respected and worshipped her creator. But it seemed that the passage of time gave her changes that she never realized. "No, do not feel dejected. It is a good change for you. One reason I did not give any effort to let you come with me after I retreated was that you showed signs of being a failure of a creation. I created you as a being, yet you behaved like nothing but a puppet. Even Bathala could not fathom what went wrong with your creation." Magwayan smiled. "But as it looked like, you only needed time. It might be my mistake for giving up on you. No, mother, it is not your fault." Silam, despite being abandoned in the past, still did not blame her creator. "No, it is a fault of mine." Magwayan shook her head. "And as it looked like, I have to fail you one more time by asking you to guide these people to the passage." Magwayan then glanced at Mark and explained to Silam. "I sent them to seek Kahilwayan in order to find a method to help kill Sonogo. Or in the least, his empty husk." Magwayan added. "Sonogo?" Silam seemed shocked. "He is still alive? Did he break his seal?" Silam's shock was not surprising. Sinago's sin was well known in Visayan myths. If someone like him was imprisoned all this time, who knows what changes could have happened to him after he broke his seal. At the black-dressed Dewata's words, Mark stepped forward. "Sonogo is dead," Mark declared. "But I believe you know what is happening in this world right now. Just like the humans that turned into undead or soulless beings, Sonogo was the same. Being a deity, he was already powerful. But he also absorbed the seal that Koptan made to imprison him. Now, he is using Koptan's energy to cause destruction." Silam stared at Mark. She seemed reluctant to let a demon chime into her conversation with her creator, but she was doing her best to hold back this time. And that information that Mark gave made Silam falter. The thief among the deities of the Supreme Sky God was actually dead but turned into those living dead creatures while using the Supreme Sky God's power. For Silam, it sure was something unforgivable. "Mother," Silam voiced out, making Magwayan's attention focus on her. "Are these demons trustworthy?" That question made Magwayan give Mark another glance. "I have only known them for a short time. Being trustworthy is not what I can confirm. In the least, I can tell you that they are not evil. There is no way that a demon that helped Tamawo and his abducted wife reunite would be evil." "What a high evaluation," Mark murmured. Silam, on the other hand, was looking at Mark's group, one by one. It was clear that she was skeptical about Mark's group. In the least, she was willing to listen to Magwayan. "Then, mother, I will heed your words," Silam said before looking at the magical races standing beside her. "Retreat. But do not let your guards down." Silam made sure that Mark's group would hear her words as a warning. "She's really cautious, isn't she?" Mark said as he stepped forward, standing beside the visage of the Visayan goddess of the underworld. I would say that rather than cautious, she was just being stubborn. Magwayan replied while watching Silam make her army retreat. How can you say so? Mark asked nonchalantly. You just said that she was like a puppet when you left. Mark received another exasperated stare from the Visayan goddess of the underworld, and when her stare returned to Silam, it was now filled with dejection. Silam was created after Litigot's death and was shaped with her visage, manner, and behavior. Unfortunately, it only manifested after several thousand years of separation. Mark gave Magwayan a side glance and did not ask for more. She must have been really sad after her daughter died, enough to make another being resemble her daughter. In any case, Mark heard a piece of rather interesting information just now. Dewatas were deities of nature as far as Mark knew. However, there were stories that they were servants of Bathala, and that was why there was more of them in Luzon, Bathala's territory, than in other parts of the Philippines. And for a Dewata, as unique as Silam, there was no way that she was someone created by Magwayan alone. In the first place, Magwayan did not have powers over creation. Even the creation of the Tamawas required the help of another minor god. It seemed that Bathala helped Magwayan to create Silam, and knowing that Silam was directly created by the two gods, it was possible that Silam might be the oldest Dewata in existence in the current Philippines. After all, the forgotten era of gods ended more than 3,000 years ago, with the Great Flood marking its end. While Mark was having those thoughts, Silam spoke after having her whole army of magical races retreat. Mother, I will let them pass as you ordered. Silam then turned to Mark's group. This way. And with that, Mark's group gained passage without needing to fight. It was not like they were totally against forceful methods, but it was more important to conserve their strength for now. It was really good that Mark had his preparations. If he did not borrow the Mark of the King from Pephile, they would have no other choice but to waste time and energy just to pass through this mountain. Anyway, shouldn't you return already? Mark said to Magwayan. You really are someone without fear, do you? Magwayan stared at Mark. You are already trying to chase me, a goddess, away right after using me. I don't know what you did, but the artifact is still full of energy. I can stay like this for another half day. You do not have to mind me. Mark's eyebrows could not help but twitch. She was just telling him that she would not hesitate to waste the energy of the mental crystal that Mark used to charge the Mark of the King. Gods sure were willful beings. Day 206 to 9:30 a.m. Secret Real, Mount Madia as Panay Mountain Range, Province of Panay. Finally getting permission to enter the secret realm, Mark's group prepared. There's nothing we forgot, right? Mark asked, looking at everyone in his group. I guess there's none. May replied while glancing at the others. Spara shook her head. And the little girls definitely had nothing they should have forgotten to bring aside from their small bags. Feng Jiruo also shook her head. As for Amihan sitting on Mark's shoulder, she did not really have anything with her. I wish we can bring the mini-cube with us, Ilya said, looking behind them. There, further away from the foot of the mountain, the mini-cube lay hidden behind trees. Not like I don't want to either, Mark responded with a shrug. But I don't think we will be able to, given its size. Besides, it will make the guys in front of us even warier. It's better to lessen the troubles that will waste our time. Everyone could only agree with Mark's words. The mini-cube was a strange and unique vessel. Knowing that all creatures had the fear of the unknown, using the mini-cube to pass through the secret realm of Mount Madia as would definitely cause fear and panic among the secret realm's residents. Not to mention that they were already wary in the first place due to Mark's group being composed of mostly demons and humans. Let's go, Chemetric called out. They're already waiting. As Chemetris said, the black-dressed Dewata was already waiting for Mark's group to finish their discussion. Even the Visayan goddess of the underworld, Magwayan, was silently watching Mark's group. Well, most of Magwayan's attention was on Chemetris, however. It was not surprising if she actually noticed what kind of magical being Chimetris was to pique her interest. However, it was not only Chimetris who caught Magwayan's attention, there was someone else. As they finished their discussion, Mark took the lead to approach Silam, who was waiting by the entrance. Silam glanced at Magwayan, and the latter responded with a nod. "Follow closely behind me." Silam turned around and said, "Do not blame me for anything that will happen otherwise." Mark did not say anything, and it was the same for the members of his group. Mark and May grasped the hands of their children, however. After all, they did not know what kind of place lay behind the invisible barrier. And rumors or not, children had more tendency to become lost inside these secret realms. Following Silam, everyone else entered the invisible barrier. And the moment they did, they could not help but feel the sudden blindness as everything in their vision went dark. It was not like they felt any kind of danger. Outside, before they entered, the sun was up high in the sky. It was late morning, after all. But inside the barrier, it was as dark as midnight. The only light looming in the sky was the moon, which strangely felt different compared to the moon Earth had. Slowly, their eyes adjusted to the darkness, and their vision returned. However, there was barely anything they could see around them due to the place being veiled under the shadows of the forest. "As I said before, follow closely," Silam spoke as she began to lead the way. Mark now understood what Silam meant by her words before entering. The place right after they entered was a natural maze obscured by the shadows of eternal darkness. Any intruder or person unfamiliar with the place would become lost inside, probably for eternity. There were no distinct pathways across the maze. Each area was covered by bushes and trees, leaving no way to see further in front. The only path Mark's group could see was the path left by Silam. But in front of here, there was no path in sight either. Instead, the way only opened the moment she walked through. In Silam's every step, the seemingly immovable bushes, vines, and plants that blocked the way would move, opening the path for her and Mark's group. The moment Mark's group passed through, the flora would return to their initial positions, closing the way behind them. Although they could not see the magical races that retreated, Mark and the others were sure they were still around. They could feel many eyes staring at their group, after all. Time passed as they moved through the forested maze. Because everything looked the same, it was hard to determine how long they spent inside or how far they went through. Mark even had to begin carrying Miracle in his arms as the little girl was having a hard time traversing the mountain terrain. Abigail was fine, however. Her agile and nimble legs sure were made for this kind of ground. Finally, after approximately 3 hours of hiking through the forest maze, they saw its end. Passing through the last couple of bushes and vines blocking the way, the scene past the forest maze welcomed everyone's eyes. "Wow!" Emihan could not help but say, seeing the scenery in front of them. It was not her first time inside a secret realm managed by a Diwata, but it was the first time she saw a place like this one. The veil of darkness still lingered around them. However, it did not hinder everyone to see the beautiful scenery. In fact, the darkness of the night and the light coming from the realm's moon made it even more beautiful. Trees with glowing leaves, plants and bushes with glowing flowers, and even grass that seemed to absorb the moonlight, everything looked amazing as they all swayed along with the wind's breeze. The amazement even grew stronger as they noticed the gigantic tree standing in the middle of the grass-covered land. It was a tree as tall as half of the mountain, with its trunk probably being hundreds of meters in diameter. Each of its leaves was as large as a person, and its gigantic flowers bloomed and glowed with a dim red light. Around the gigantic tree, floating flames and glowing lights flew around. If one was to look closely, those flames and lights were actually small people, playing around the tree. Those flames were not the fire spirits called Santelmo, or Saint Elmo's fire. They were small fairy-like spirits with flaming hair called Burlaka. Their names were derived from the word Bulalaka, which meant meteor. It was due to the fact that when flying, Burlakas turned into a ball of fire which looked like a meteor. Their behavior were also different from Santelmo's, but they were often mistaken as such. As for the glowing lights, they were a mixture of sylphs and forest nymphs locally called lambanas. The floating flames and lights aside, Mark's group's attention was focused on the gigantic tree. A pure spirit tree, Mark said, looking at the gigantic tree. It was the third time Mark had seen one. The first was, of course, his own pure spirit tree, the night-evered spirit tree, which he named Shio. The second one he saw was the pure spirit tree of the sylphs, which had been corrupted and destroyed by the mutated infected Berberoka. It seems you're knowledgeable. Silam spoke to Mark for the first time. It seemed that Mark was the very first guest to know what the tree was in one glance. I have my own pure spirit tree, so it's not hard to determine another when I see one. Mark replied nonchalantly. Of course, it made the black-dressed Diwata really surprised as she turned to Magwayan, who responded with another nod. This man indeed has his own, Magwayan confirmed. And how did you know that? Mark asked. I never called you out in my place. Magwayan let out a smirk. Although minimal, I can sense things around the artifact you are carrying. Do not think that I would not know just because I am not called. That was right. In the first place, Magwayan used the mark of the king to communicate with the kings of Tamawas. It meant that she could sense the surroundings around the artifact to some extent. Mark did not mull over that fact. Instead, he was focused on the pure spirit tree as they continued their hike. That tree. It's sleeping, isn't it? Mark asked, making Silam even more surprised. Not only Mark was able to confirm what the tree was but could actually tell its current state. At this time, it was Magwayan who answered Mark. It had been asleep after it lost its master. Magwayan explained. That is the tree where Siddhapa spent most of his time sitting underneath. It was just a normal tall tree at first. But having Siddhapa's presence and being his instrument to measure the human's life and death, it became a tree harboring a spirit. It was not like your young, pure spirit tree, born from a seed. This tree became one through change and growth affected by Siddhapa. It would not take anyone as its master aside from him, which caused it to sleep for all eternity. No wonder. Mark murmured. It was a pity that such a rare thing was left masterless. But given its story, there was nothing to be done with it. After all, it was a tree nurtured by a god. It would not be like other pure spirit trees that magical races could fight over. In the first place, even if some unknowingly greedy being tried to invade just for the sleeping, pure spirit tree, they would likely be defeated even before they could get out of the forest maze. The hike up the mountain continued, passing through the grassland of glowing flowers. Soon, they could see what seemed to be a village from afar. There were huts made of leaves, trees, and vines. Some of the huts seemed new while some looked extremely old. But what made Mark rather surprised when the village entered his detection range was humans. Mark voiced out, getting everyone's attention. You. Silam frowned. You can tell all the way from here? Mark voiced his words instinctively due to surprise. Well, who would not be? In the first place, why was there a village of humans in this rather unwelcoming place? Magwayan stared at Silam. It seemed that she knew nothing of this either, meaning it was something that happened recently. Sensing the stare of her creator, Silam began to explain. About a little more than a month ago in human measures of time, when the spirit dimension and the mortal world fused, some parts of the barrier cracked open. Many humans that fled to the mountain due to the current state of the mortal world fell unto the crack and ended up in this realm. We decided to bring them out. However, they begged us to stay. I'm surprised you agreed. Mark said. We might be hostile to demons, but we have leniency towards humans. Silam replied without even looking at Mark. Besides, they were all confined within the village and its surroundings. If even just one of them decided to break the rules given to them, all of them would be chased back to their chaotic world. And given that strict rule, none of them had broken it so far, right? Mark voiced out with a nod. Well, with the current state of Earth, most people would rather be imprisoned as long as they won't end up getting eaten alive. By the way, Mark continued speaking and asked, "Why are you bringing us here?" And the reply came from Magwayan. "The passage to Kahilwayan only opens when it is both daytime in this realm and outside." Magwayan then looked at the sky, seemingly measuring the current angle of the moon. It would not likely happen until tomorrow noon. Yes. It would open tomorrow noon. Silam nodded in agreement. "I brought you all here to rest. This is the only place where we can let guests stay temporarily." "Tomorrow, huh?" Mark shrugged and looked at Magwayan. "You should have told us earlier. We could use some more free time." "Would it not be better to gain permission to enter early?" Magwayan reasoned. "And as you see, we are only halfway up the mountain. You would have enough time to get there before it opens without missing it." Mark fell silent. What Magwayan said was reasonable. In any case, from Silam's words, their status was now upgraded from intruders or passerby to being guests. Since she was now showing some hospitality, it would not hurt to accept it. Day 206 AAA Old Village, Secret Realm, Mount Madia as, Panay Mountain Range, Province of Aklan, Island of Panay. "How long are we going to stay in this place?" A woman in her mid-20s asked another woman sitting beside her while kindling the campfire in front of them. "I don't know." The other woman, likely a few years older, answered. "There's only a few of us wanted to leave this place. There's barely anything we can do if we go back with only a few people." "I know that, but this place isn't where we should be." The younger woman sighed. "We are humans, and we should be on Earth, not this place home for those creatures." "Damn it." The younger woman continued. "We are already doing fine before that meteor shower and earthquake happened." The younger woman sure was indignant about their current situation. These two women were sisters and survivors from Kalibo, Aklan, one of the few ground zeros of the outbreak in the island of Panay. With inevitable sacrifices and gathering allies, they managed to reach and climb up the highest mountain on the island of Panay, Mount Madia as. Due to the mountain's geographical advantages, the survivors the two gathered managed to establish a small community up Mount Madia as. It was not exactly a safe place since they would receive attacks from monstrous animals from time to time. But with tactics and skills, they managed to live until now. It was until a month ago, when Earth suddenly faced another unexpected calamity. It was fortunate that none of the things that fell from the sky hit their settlement, but the earthquake that came after destroyed everything. Large boulders fell from the mountain, crushing their newly built homes. The walls they painstakingly constructed fell without resistance. And when they fled from the landslide, they suddenly fell into the void, filled with fear and dissatisfaction on how their lives would end. And the moment they woke up, the sisters found themselves surrounded by creatures they had only seen and heard from fiction, legends, and folklore in a place they were never familiar with. Fortunately, despite their initial fear, those creatures allowed them to temporarily stay to heal their wounds. It was a good thing since none of them that survived the catastrophe were left unscathed. Some of them had broken bones that had yet to heal even now. When the majority of the group were already healed enough regained their strength to leave this place, however. They instead begged to stay in this place than return home. And it led to the current situation. It was nice that their food and water were provided to them. The survivors did not have to go hungry anymore and face the dangers outside. However, what most of them could not see, they were basically prisoners in this place. They had no freedom here. This was not a place for humans like them. But as people that struggled through the apocalyptic world since the start, this kind of life was better for them. It was better than a life where they could be eaten by the enemies at any moment. "Huh." The younger woman let out a loud sigh as she glanced at the houses near them. They could only sleep freely since they already took things for granted. The older woman did not say anything as she reached for her stick and adjusted the firewood on the campfire. At this time, the two women noticed the silhouettes outside the village. They could not help but stand from their seats, knowing that anything could happen, both good and bad. Furthermore, as it was nighttime, they could not see the silhouettes clearly. But as the silhouettes came closer, they could not hear the voices from what seemed to be a group of people. People? The younger woman voiced out in surprise as she could not see a group of men, women, and children. Seeing a group of unfamiliar people, the two sisters could not help but feel both cautious and excited. After all, they would be the first group of people they would meet for a very long time. The last time the sisters saw new people was more than 4 months ago, after all. What stopped the sisters from approaching, however? The Dewata, who led the creatures in this place, was guiding the group. It was not like the sisters hated the Dewata. In fact, they were grateful to her. Most of the creatures in this place disliked humans and wanted to throw them out. However, it was the Dewata who insisted to let them stay in this place to heal their injuries. She was also the one that allowed them to stay after the majority begged. The Dewata, the two sisters could feel some sort of suppression coming from her. It was not only the two of them but their whole group. That was why even if they were thankful to her, it was hard for them to face her directly. And now, that feeling was multiplied, as the two sisters saw the ghostly visage of another woman floating beside the Dewata. On the other side, Mark's group walked towards the village led by Silam. He could feel the stare of the two women they could see standing by the campfire near the entrance of the village. "This is the closest I could lead you all," Silam spoke. "Normal humans, after all, could not withstand my presence at close proximity." "Won't it be the same for you too?" Mark asked Magwayan. In fact, she had a subtle aura that Mark's group needed to endure all the way here despite being a temporary avatar. Fortunately, Magwayan was aware of it and toned down as much as she could. Even so, regular humans would definitely suffocate from her presence alone. "Give the artifact to Silam." Magwayan ignored Mark's question and said, "Now that I am given a chance, there are things I needed to speak to her. I won't recharge more energy on this," Mark blatantly said as he handed the Mark of the King to Silam. "You did not have to fret about it," Magwayan replied. "Just Silam holding it would be enough to keep the connection intact. I would not be able to directly transfer energy onto the artifact, but Silam, who held the same energy as mine, could." Mark nodded. That was something he did not put in mind. Silam was born from Magwayan's magical energy. She should be able to transfer the same energy since she and the Mark of the King had the same origin. "Then, I will send someone to contact your group tomorrow morning," Silam said as she began to turn and leave. "You can ask the two humans there which house is currently vacant." And there, Silam and Magwayan parted with Mark's group, vanishing into the darkness of the night. Mark's group then continued on towards the village after the two left. Seeing the two women standing in front of the campfire, Mark turned to Elia. "You ask me?" Elia asked, pointing at herself. "Yeah, you." Mark nodded. "Why?" Elia asked again. "Don't tell me you're feeling shy?" "No," Mark shrugged. "You're the only extrovert in this group. So this kind of task should fall on you, all right?" Elia could not help but look at the members of the group one by one, and then, she could only let out an exasperated sigh. Mark was right. She was the only extrovert in this group. "Just do it, Elia," Shemetris urged. "You are the best in dealing with other people than any of us here." "Okay, Master." Elia smiled. "If you say so," and with the rest of the group standing behind, Elia approached the two women. "Hello. To you too." Elia greeted first, which made the two women rather flustered. Elia, being an elder succubus, was a beautiful and physically attractive woman. Her beauty could mesmerize people of any gender. It could not be helped if the two women felt flustered facing her, not to mention that her beauty looked foreign for them. Well, Elia was not a local, after all. Not to mention that she asked the two in English, just to be sure, since the provinces of the Philippines tend to have their own language or two. While there were places in the Philippines that had people not that proficient in speaking Tagalog, those same places should be able to speak English. Hello." The older woman managed to recover first and greeted Elia back. Hello." The younger woman also greeted in a hurry. "We're told to rest here for the rest of the night. Which houses are vacant? Or at least, the ones we can use?" Elia asked. At the question, The two women glanced around for a bit before answering. We only occupied the west side of the village. The houses on the east side are all empty and unused. The older woman answered. Is that so? Then thank you. Elia thanked with an alluring smile. There might only be a campfire to light up that smile, but it was more than enough to make the two women stare at her as she turned around. You guys heard them, Elia said to Mark and the rest. Let's go. Elia then grabbed Shemetrus's arm, and she pulled him towards the east side of the village. Mark and the others followed suit, not minding the two women watching their group. Gerger, I'm pretty sure you already know which houses are vacant, right? May asked Mark. After all, it was no secret among their group that he could detect emotional fluctuations and use it as a radar. Yeah, Mark answered. But it's still better to ask. After all, it might be empty now, but what if that house is in use during the day? It would be awkward if they came to the house we chose only to find us there. The rest could only agree with Mark's reasoning. They chose a few houses in the furthest area on the east side of the village. This way, they could keep their contact with the people staying here to a minimum. After all, they were just staying here for the rest of the night of this realm. Asterisk asterisk. What a gorgeous woman, the younger woman said, looking at the group that was walking away. I'm feeling jealous. Yeah, that woman is gorgeous, but the other one seemed to be more beautiful. The older woman said. Which one? The younger asked, looking at the group, searching for who her sister was talking about. The girl holding one of the children's hands. Unfortunately, she's standing further away and is wearing a veil on her face. But I can tell, she's really beautiful. Ah, that one. The younger sister said, finally realizing who her older sister was talking about. And then, she began whispering. It's hard to see, so I don't know. But the guy at the center. He sure looks the complete opposite of how beautiful those women are. Donna. You know that's rude. The older sister reprimanded her younger sister. No, Bella. I'm not being rude, I'm just telling the truth. The younger sister argued. In any case, while they seemed to be arguing, their mood surely was lifted after meeting new people. One of their frustrations was the feeling of being imprisoned in this place, and seeing new faces sure helped raise their mood. Asterisk asterisk. Huh. Mark sighed. Gerger, is something wrong? May asked Mark, seeing that exasperated sigh. Nothing. I'm just thinking if there could be a mutation somewhere that allows a person to change their appearance. What for? May asked. You know, disguise and stuff. Mark said with a shrug. I'm pretty sure he wanted to be handsome for once. Spera chimed in. But Gerger looks fine enough, though. May turned to Spera, confused. It made everyone turn to her, definitely questioning her tastes. Even Mark, who was the person in question, stared at her. Papa is handsome. Miracle also chimed in, cutely puffing her cheeks at Spera. No, the opinion of a woman blindly in love and the daughter who knew nothing doesn't count here. Ahem, forget I said something. Spera was about to argue, only to feel the cold chill enveloping her. Geez. Spera complained. You don't mind having your appearance ridiculed, but you get angry at a single word said about your wife and daughters. Seriously. I'm starting to wish I have someone like you as my father. Nah, I don't want a daughter as annoying as you. Mark made a snide comment. Hey, Spera glared at Mark. Mark's group made their way to their houses where they would spend the rest of the night. None of them would go sleep, however. After all, it was just past noon outside. What they needed to do was to have lunch. Not no to their group, however. It seemed that Silam and Magwayan were having some strange conversation. Day 206 AAA Secret Realm, Mount Madia as Panay Mountain Range, Province of Aklan. At the clearing under the sleeping, pure spirit tree, two figures sat covered in the night's darkness. It had been a long time since the last I had been here. Magwayan calmly said as she reminisced her memories overlapping with the sceneries around her. After several thousand years, while this place remained hidden, many things changed. The people Magwayan knew were no longer here. The village occupied by their servants was left abandoned. And a new, larger village could be seen on the other side of the mountain. However, some things never change. One was the pure spirit tree that Siddhapa owned. The other was this place where they were currently seated. This was the very place where Siddhapa sat under his tree, and as it seemed, it was maintained the way it was even after a very long time. You personally maintained this place? Magwayan asked Silam, sensing that her presence was etched around this place. Yes. Silam respectively replied. As the messenger between Mother and Siddhapa, I believe that it is my duty to keep this place as is despite Mother and Siddhapa's absence. That reply from Silam made Magwayan smile. It seemed that she was really satisfied with Silam's growth. It was a pity, however, she was not there to witness the process. Magwayan turned her head, looking at the empty seat surrounded by the roots of the pure spirit tree. How did the others face that calamity? Magwayan asked. They all faced it valiantly, Silam responded with a meaningful sigh. Unfortunately, the protectors of this world are backed by its laws. Even if the gods resisted, working together and burned their existence, they still faced their end. Magwayan stared at the empty seat in silence for a few moments. Siddhapa is not a reckless being. And being the harbinger of death, she should have ways to escape danger. It is because of her husband, Makopton, Silam explained. The god of sickness had a remarkably elevated pride. He led the resistance, dragging Siddhapa into the battle she never wanted. They perished together along with the other deities of Kamaritan. It is a pity. Magwayan smiled sadly. The laws of this world began to change while I was ferrying the dead. It was a fortunate circumstance for me but not for the others. Magwayan closed her eyes, remembering the calamity during the end of the era of gods on earth. As the goddess of the underworld and the fairy woman of the dead, she was always amidst transporting the souls of the departed towards Sulad. And when the new administrator of Earth, the current observer, took the position, Magwayan was amidst her duties as the fairy woman. She was outside the jurisdiction of the eyes, and managed to escape without getting noticed. Magwayan might be powerful as one of the principal beings of the Visayan pantheon. However, her powers were never made for battle. And although she still had her abilities as the previous goddess of the sea, it was something negligible against the beings protected by the laws of the world. Mother. At this silence, Silam took the opportunity to ask. Those people, do we really have to guide them to Kahilwayan? Their group was led by demons. It seems that you are still reluctant, Magwayan replied. I'm sorry, Mother. Silam apologized. You did not have to apologize. Magwayan slightly shook her head. I am the same. We sealed the passage to Kahilwayan after Kaptan left this world, and the deities under him decided to return to our world. From that time forwards, no one was allowed to step into the sacred land Kaptan created. Then, Silam tried to speak, but she was met with a decisive stare from her creator. The circumstances now are different, Magwayan stated, standing from her seat and facing the pure spirit tree. Sonogo finally escaped from his seal after succumbing to this world's recent calamity. The worst thing. Sonogo absorbed Kaptan's seal and its remaining energy. At this time, Sonogo might be roaming the local seas, wreaking havoc using my beloved husband's powers. Even I find that unacceptable. But is it really safe? Silam worried. I might be less reluctant if it was just regular demons. But that demon and his wife, they have the potential to become gods. We might end up helping our potential enemies in the future. Magwayan closed her eyes. From her expression, she understood Silam's worries. Even among gods, aside from evil gods, demon gods were the most painful to deal with. Becoming a god was akin to changing their past race to a new one. It was not wrong to say that gods were a race of their own. Although some gods were called demon gods, beast gods, human gods, and the like, their races were all the same as long as they attained godhood. What mattered, however, was their origin race. While demons were also divided into countless races, the majority of them were inherently evil. and most evil gods were once demons that attained godhood. In the least, however, like spirit and elemental races, demons were not all evil. From what I observed, it is not something you should be worried about. Magwayan opened her eyes. If they were evil as you think, the incarnation of that gentle girl would not accompany them. That. Silam fell silent since the words of her creator this time were not something she could refute. I was also surprised. I did not expect to meet another god's incarnation in the current times, given that the protectors of this world chased away or killed the gods of the past. Furthermore, accompanying a group of demons and humans. Two of their members were not human nor demon, either. Silam continued. I could not tell what the little girl was, but the other man, he had a mixture of different auras on his body that belonged to both holy and demonic creatures. If you and the residents of this realm fought them, who do you think will win? Magwayan suddenly asked Silam, who could not help but immediately fall into contemplation. And after a moment of thinking, Silam answered, we will suffer a devastating defeat. The answer made Magwayan smile. It is good that you know how to measure the strength of the people in front of you. Do not antagonize them in any way. What I will say is unbelievable. But their group had direct connections to the protectors. The first time I met that Mark, he was with two protectors standing beside him. Magwayan then stared at Silam. Right now, you might be the only one left among my people from that era. I do not want you to die in vain. Yes, mother, Silam said with all seriousness. I will heed your words. Silam looked at her creator. Magwayan might be the goddess of the underworld and the fairy woman of the departed. She was strict and a bit uncompromising. However, she was one of the kindest gods that appeared in this country in the past. And to her people, she was like a mother. Now, then. Magwayan spoke. Should we talk about something else? I wanted to hear your stories. I would love to, mother. Silam delightfully replied. Day 206 AAA. Old Village, Secret Realm, Mount Madia as, Panay Mountain Range, Province of Aklan. At the village, Mark's group began preparing. It was not to sleep, however. Mark took out a double gas burner and an LPG tank. They began setting up a place to cook. Although it was nighttime in this realm and hard to tell what time it was already, it was still about past noon outside. Since Mark's group went hiking up the mountain a few hours before noon and just stopped now, they were unable to eat lunch. Thus, they were already hungry, especially the little girls. What do you guys want to eat? Mark asked. Food was not a problem for them. Mark and May had a lot of food stored inside their rings, not to mention the portion they left stored in the mini-cube. I want some rice, Ilya said, and both Spera and Feng Jiruo agreed. Feng Jiruo aside, it was surprising that Ilya and Spera, both foreigners, liked rice. After all, unlike countries in East, Southeast, and South Asia, most foreign countries did not have rice as their staple food. However, Ilya and Spera came to like rice and how it could blend well with any kind of side dish they were offered. As for Chemetris, what kind of food he was given did not matter. It was not like he could not taste anything. But for him, food was nothing but sustenance. Mark's question did not matter for both Miracle and Amihan, either. Miracle would only consume Mark's blood, and Amihan would only eat fruits. Well, Miracle was actually starting to eat other kinds of food. She would not eat as much and would only consume soft food like porridge or sweet fruits, or naturally flavored drinks like milk. Nonetheless, it was a good sign that her body was beginning to adapt. And as requested, Mark and May began preparing rice, and for the side dish, it would be fried canned meatloaves. Mark also separated some of the rice to make porridge for Miracle. There, they began cooking. Unfortunately, the cooking could only fall unto Mark and May. Both Ilya and Spera were terrible at this, while Feng Jiruo was only good at slicing ingredients. As Mark was amidst frying the sliced meatloaves, however, Mark detected a pair of uninvited guests. Glancing at Ilya, Mark signaled to intercept the two who were hiding behind one of the houses. Slurp. Donna slurped the drool at the side of her mouth. The smell. Donna, why do we have to hide like this? The older sister, Bella, questioned Donna. We looked like we are doing something bad. But we can't just approach them, either, Donna answered. Then, we should just return. Bella sighed. It is not like we are starving to death. But, Donna hesitated. I'm already sick of eating fruits and boiled vegetables. Those are the only things we receive here. Maybe we can ask even just a single slice of what they are frying. Bella sighed. If you want to ask them, then stop hiding. You're just making yourself look suspicious. Bella understood her sister's frustration. Even she was kind of sick of the food they were being given here. However, she had better self-control than her younger sister. That is right. If you want to ask for food, stop hiding. You can get yourselves killed this way. Suddenly, a voice was heard behind the two. Hiih. Donna screamed in surprise and jumped back. Bella was calmer, but she also retreated. There, they saw the gorgeous woman that spoke to them at the entrance of the village. The two sisters did not know how the gorgeous woman managed to get behind them. It made them really nervous. However, compared to their nervousness, their craving weighed heavier. Despite her defensive stance, Donna asked the gorgeous woman. Can we really ask? Even a slice is just fine. We'll just share it with each other. The gorgeous woman tapped her chin. Asking is free. But the call won't come from me. I'm not the leader, after all. Anyway, stop hiding and follow me. He might not look like it, but our leader won't bite. It's unless you two are planning something bad. With those words, the gorgeous woman passed between the two and straight to where the cooking was happening. ***. So, are they asking for food, right? Mark asked as Elia returned with the two uninvited guests in tow. Why ask if you already know the answer? Elia shrugged. Mark then turned to the others. What do you guys think? Spera and Feng Jiruo looked at each other. We don't really mind. Spera said, and the others agreed. Food was the least of concern for Mark's group. That was why they did not really mind giving away some. Hearing the decision of the group, Bella and Donna were extremely delighted. They became even happier to the point of tears as they were not only given a slice of fried meatloaf but a bowl of rice and a few more slices. How long had it been since they ate actual food? Nonetheless, happy times would not always end happily. Wah! Who are you, people? A man with a haughty face appeared, also lured in by the smell. He then saw the two sisters. You two. What are you eating? How dare you two eat on your own? Day 206 AAA Old Village, Secret Real, Mount Madia as, Panay Mountain Range, Province of Aklan. To have someone running into others' mealtime, running off his mouth and shouting, that person was bound to attract everyone's attention. It was the same for Mark and the members of his group. They could not help but stare at the man that barged into their mealtime. The man sure was a rude one, disturbing other people's mealtime. But the most important thing, Elia turned towards the sisters, who were both showing exasperated expressions. What is he saying? Elia asked in confusion. That confusion was the main reason that everyone stared at the man. After all, none of Mark's group members were locals of this province. Even if they were a bit familiar with one or two words of everything that man said, there was very little chance they would understand the message. Thus, whatever that man shouted at them, it did not matter. Aside from the fact that he was rude, they could not understand him. The question towards the two sisters made the two show a bitter smile. From the start, the two sisters realized that the new people that arrived were not locals of this province. Furthermore, 3 of the group were clearly foreigners. And, of course, the guy that barged in without thinking had no way of knowing this. We're sorry. The older of the two sisters replied to Elia, not answering the question knowing that it would cause more trouble. Can you please leave this to us? Elia turned to Mark, hearing the older sister's reply. Mark gave her a glance and a slight nod. Then, please deal with it quickly while no one is dead yet. Elia said to the two sisters, making them a bit flustered. What did this gorgeous woman mean by, while no one was dead yet? Nonetheless, that reply made the two sisters feel a bit relieved. The two of them did not survive this apocalypse for nothing. A little misunderstanding could cause a lot of trouble in the current world, not to mention reckless aggressiveness. To the two women, this group of strangers was still dangerous people. It was aside from the fact that they were kind enough to share food with them. Kindness begets kindness. The inverse was the same. The two sisters nodded at each other, putting this problem into their hands. Asterisk asterisk. What does it matter to you? Donna stood up, returning the man's aggressiveness. We can eat anything we want. You. The man sure was infuriated even more. He was not that affected by Bella's retort. However, what made him mad was how these unfamiliar people were literally ignoring him. They even continued to eat, watching him as if he was an attraction in a circus. This is our village. Letting outsiders inside. Who in the world is sane to do that? The man yelled. Then, that food. We are all eating strange fruits and boiled vegetables all this month. Eating food on your own. You selfish women. Isn't it the duty of you two to distribute food in the first place? Bella and Donna stared at the man incredulously. Just what in the world was this idiot talking about? You're out of your mind, aren't you? Are you still dreaming? Wake up, will you? Now. Even the calmer Bella stood up, putting down her plate of food on an old table nearby. Since when was this village ours? We are nothing but freeloaders here. And why would you complain about the food? You chose that. Aren't you the one who did not want to leave this place the most, you coward? And our duty to distribute food? That's only when we can actually find something to distribute. In this place? Can we find food in this place? We can't even step outside this village. We can only wait when the food arrives, and it is already distributed evenly for us. Both Bella and Donna knew their place. It was one of the reasons they wanted to leave. This village was not theirs. They had no freedom here. Unfortunately, the other survivors of their group took the kindness of the Diwata for granted. It seemed that peacefully staying in this place made them forget who they were in the first place. The actual owner of this village was the Diwata, and the creatures living in this realm. Not them who were only allowed to stay out of pity. And these people the man called outsiders were brought here by the Diwata herself. Both Bella and Donna saw them approaching the village with the Diwata leading them after all. It was not something they, people who begged to stay here, could question. Yet, this narrow-minded man who just woke up from sleep blurted out nonsense without thinking about his position. You too. Who cares about that? Why are you two even siding with outsiders? The man sure was not getting any of it into that thick skull of his. He was not even listening to reason. His eyes focused on the food at the center of the group of strangers instead. That was right. The man's reason was already consumed by his worldly craving. He's not listening, is he? Donna sighed, glancing at her sister. Bella replied with a nod at that glance. There's no choice then, Bella said as she bent her right arm, putting her right hand beside her left cheek. The man saw that stance, and his eyes dilated. Why you? What are you doing? The man took a step back and made a stance of his own. Unfortunately, the man could not do anything after that. Bella waved her right arm, now covered in glittering dust, towards the man. The man froze and slowly fell to the ground as if he lost all his energy. Yo urk. Yo u bit chs. The man was still conscious, spitting curse after curse at the two sisters with his unstable voice. Ha! He's not stopping. Bella gave another sigh as she approached the weakened man. She stood beside him, looking down at the man lying by her feet. Slightly stretching her hand over him, she began whisking her fingers, sprinkling glittering dust on the man. This time, the man froze entirely. Even his mouth was left open, saliva overflowing. His eyes were still open, but it was clear that he already passed out. Let's drag this garbage out, Bella said to her sister, grabbing the man's leg and preparing to drag the man away. Wait, Donna said, grabbing their plates of food and turning to the gorgeous woman and the others. "Thank you for the food and sorry for the trouble. We'll return the plates later." And there, the two sisters dragged the nuisance away. Well, while leaving a meaningful glance at the man they presumed to be the leader of the group. Asterisk asterisk. "Looks like they are sensible people," Mark remarked, watching the two ladies dragging the man away, with the slight red glow on his eyes fading. "You orchestrated it, didn't you?" Spera asked Mark, with her inquisitive eyes piercing holes on him. "There is no way you didn't detect that guy coming here. Yet, you didn't say a word." "Gerger, did you find something interesting to do that?" May also asked Mark. There was no way that the slight glow in his eyes would pass May's attention. Those questions made Elia and Feng Jiruo curious about Mark's intentions. "Well, that guy is bound to cause us trouble anyway, so I just put him to use," Mark confessed. "Though I didn't expect that he can't even retaliate against those two even though the three of them were mutators." It would be a lie if May and the others said they were not surprised that both the two sisters had some sort of strange ability. Now that Mark confirmed it, they could only wonder what kind of ability they had. All they saw was their hands releasing those glittering dust, and the man could not retaliate anymore. "But they actually used their abilities in front of us, huh?" Spera said. "Are they stupid? They should be hiding their cards in front of strangers." "No, they are not stupid," Mark said, actually refuting Spera. "Although they showed it like they were just disciplining their own people, it's also a warning for us. They were thankful for the food and sorry for the trouble, but they would not just stand back if we try to harm their own. I guess you guys didn't see them glance at me before they left." "That glance was for you? I thought it was for the food in front of you," Spera said, looking at the rest of the food Mark had displayed in front of him. "That's what I will also think if I can't read their emotions," Mark stated. "Well, the nuisance is gone. Let's continue eating." Asterisk asterisk. "Bella," Donna called her older sister. "Won't this guy make a fuss about it when he wakes up?" "It can't be helped," Bella replied. "This is way better than having him get killed." "Huh? Killed?" Donna was confused at the words of her older sister. "It seems you didn't pay attention," Bella explained. "Remember what the woman said when we asked to deal with the situation. Also, when we used our powers, those people barely reacted." "The woman's warning aside, what is wrong with their reaction?" Donna asked. "Did you forget how the others reacted to us when we used our powers in front of them for the first time?" Bella asked back. It made Donna silent as she remembered. Everyone. They were afraid of Bella and Donna. Even so, many clung to them for protection since their powers helped people around them survive. Yet, that group barely reacted. It was either they had seen others with powers before, or they had powers of their own. In the first place, there was no way that a small group of people like that, even having children with them, would be able to survive this world without enough strength. If not for the fact that they were also craving to eat actual food, Bella would not allow Donna to approach that group of strangers at all. They were strangers, after all. Although they showed kindness, it might just be a facade. Who would know what those people really were? Well, definitely not Bella and Donna. It was better to be cautious than regret that they did not. "I don't think they're bad, though," Donna said, raising the plates of food in her hands. "They gave us food, after all." "Huh." Bella sighed at how simple her younger sister was. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The night of the realm slowly passed without many events happening. It was not surprising, considering the place they were in. Since the village was occupied by humans, the other residents of the realm would not approach it. That was why it was so quiet. After the incident with the man, the two sisters also made sure not to let anyone from their side wander into the eastern side of the village. It was for the safety of both sides. With the peace and quiet they got, Mark's group had nothing much to do. Instead, May spent time playing with the girls while Mark began drawing things. Those drawings were not just some artistic stuff, however. He was drawing blueprints and designs of weapons he could make in the future. Soon, the night of the realm passed with its own sun rising. Seeing the sun and moon of this realm and even its stars, Mark finally understood what Magwayan said before. The myths of ancient Visayas did have some truths in them. It was the remains of the grandchildren of Kaptan and Magwayan. This realm was not just a small dimension, it was a small but complete universe of its own. Unfortunately, to stop this realm from affecting the world outside, it was made limited. And even if there were things they could see from afar, not all of them were obtainable or even reachable. Like the sun, moon, stars, and the silhouettes of the islands they could see from afar in this realm. Day 207 AAA Old Village, Secret Realm, Mount Madhya as, Panay Mountain Range, Province of Aklan. The morning in the secret realm came. Mark's group was already wakened up the moment the sun of this small world peeked from its limited horizon. Why say they were wakened up? Were they asleep? It was not in the plan, but unfortunately, yes. From the time that Mark's group arrived in this realm, it was around midnight. It would only take around several hours of waiting, and there would be no need to sleep. However, after a few hours, Mark's group, even Mark, who did not sleep that much, already felt tired. There was nothing wrong with the surroundings, and there was definitely nothing that did this to them on purpose. Instead, that few hours of nighttime felt longer to them. It was as if their bodies were not adjusting to the sudden slow of time in this secret realm. And instead, their bodies were still counting the time that passed outside. It was rather odd. Mark monitored the other group on the west side of the village, and they seemed to be following this realm's time speed. This meant that there was nothing wrong with the place itself. Back in the spirit dimension, Mark and the others did have the same state. However, not as much as this time, and they managed to adjust soon after. Then what was wrong this time? What was different? Was it because this secret realm was different from the spirit dimension? And, from what Mark realized, there was one obvious thing that changed. It was because they were stronger than before. Mark's group was far stronger than the time they went into the spirit dimension. They were strong enough to not be affected by the laws of this small world, and their bodies still followed the rules of Earth. Thinking about it, Mark also did not feel anything strange when he entered the secret realm of the Tamawas. It might be because he did not spend that much time there. If he did, he might have noticed it. In any case, due to their body clocks still following Earth's time, it became easier to guess what time it was outside, and they managed to wake up in time to prepare. Well, there's not much to prepare anyway, considering they just spent half the night in this place. As they finished their preparations, Mark felt the presence of people outside the village. It made him tilt his head in confusion. Mark would not be able to detect Magwayan, considering that she was only here in the form of an avatar made of energy. Thus, it was only supposed to be the black-dressed, Diwata, Silam, that should fetch them from this place. Yet, Mark called everyone in his group, making their way to the entrance of the village. And there, with Magwayan and Silam in the lead, an army composed of several magical races. Surely, this scene surprised the rest of Mark's group. Some members of the group of people at the west side of the village had seen the commotion. They had to wake up everyone and watch in worry. After all, none of them knew what was going on. What if they were chased away all of a sudden? And as such, they all witnessed the strangers that arrived last night face the monsters outside. What's the event? Mark nonchalantly asked, not minding the large number of creatures in front of them. Anyone would definitely feel unnerved at this scene. However, not Mark. He knew that these creatures were not here to fight. However, some glared at Mark as they saw how he did not show any respect to either Magwayan or Silam. To them, someone like Mark had no right to speak to their goddess and deity, like an equal. Silam noticed the reaction of her people and raised her hand. She did not want to get into conflict, especially now that she knew the circumstances of Mark's group. And seeing Silam's command, the army stayed put, not moving an inch or voicing their thoughts. To Mark's question, Magwayan answered. How long had it been since the eyes chased away the gods from this world? Since then, the path to Kahilwayan had been sealed with no one to witness its glory. And now, after thousands of years, it will be opened once more. These young ones wanted to witness what their ancestors could not. Mark nodded, understanding why he could feel that every single one of this magical army felt excited. After thousands of years, their holy land would be opened once more. While the reason was not a thing that they could accept, seeing its path open was more than enough to offset their disappointment to some extent. Furthermore, it was the goddess of the underworld who allowed it. There was no way for them to voice out their discontent. "Then, are we going with everyone here?" Mark asked. "Yes," Silam replied. "There is no need to fret. They would not bother you or your group." With those simple exchanges, it was decided that it was now time for everyone to leave. "We still have some excess time, but we should make haste," Magwayan said as she and Silam led everyone up the mountain. The goddess and the Dewata led the hike up the mountain with Mark's group immediately behind them, and at their tail, the army of magical races followed in excitement. Back in the old village, everyone, with the exception of a single person, witnessed the entire event in front of the entrance. And without a doubt, they were rather terrified. Bella and Donna met the group that arrived a few hours ago. It was a short meeting, and they did not even manage to reach the point of being able to introduce themselves before trouble came. However, they did see them arrive while being led by the Dewata. That was one reason for them to be cautious, since these people could stand side by side the Dewata. For them, they would subconsciously feel chilled and have goosebumps just with the Dewata's presence. And now, they saw a woman beside the Dewata, which made their knees tremble for no apparent reason. Yet, that strange group last night did not seem to be affected by it. Furthermore, the leader of the group could talk to those beings using a language they had never heard before. What was going on? They could not understand, and as such, they were horribly terrified. At this point, Bella and Donna could only stare at the hut where they left the unconscious man. What could have happened if they did not stop him? In the first place, were those people actually humans? What if they were not? Those thoughts made the two sisters shiver. Following Magwayan and Silam, Mark's group went up the mountain. The village was halfway the mountain, meaning they still had another half of it to climb. With the height of Mount Madia as, it would normally take 2 to 3 days hike. It was one of the most challenging mountains in the Visayas to climb. However, they were planning to climb half of it in just a few hours. If it was something mentioned to professional hikers, they would definitely say that it was impossible. However, with Magwayan and Silam in the lead, everything went easier. Silam, after all, was a Dewata. Despite being created using Magwayan's magical energy, she was someone adored by nature, as her race implied. As they climbed up the mountain, plants would make way. Vines would make stairs on steep ledges and lead everyone up without trouble. There was no need to mention that their pace was inhuman in the first place, considering none of them were simple humans. After a while, Mark stared at Silam. Of course, the stare from behind got her attention. "Is there something you need?" Silam asked Mark. "Nothing. You just look pale," Mark replied. "I guess recharging your mother's artifact is too much even for you. Don't tell me you did not leave each other all this while?" At Mark's question, even Magwayan had a rather bitter expression. "This child wanted to spend time with me, as you see," Magwayan explained. "I did tell her to rest and call me at the appointed time, but she insisted that I stay." Mark looked at the two with a sigh. "You two are overdoing it. We can't have our guides collapse midway." It was true. Mark needed these two to guide their group. Yet, it seemed that their separation for a very long time made them take a few risks. "I will not fall just from this," Silam said. "And after this, the artifact would be returned to you, and I might not see Mother once again. I am just spending as much time with Mother as possible." "Well, if you say so." Mark shrugged. Continuing the hike, they unexpectedly passed by another village built on the face of the mountain. It was something one could describe what a village of forest elves would look like. However, there were actually humans living in that village. As they passed by, some of the humans even went out of the balcony of their houses. They then bowed towards Silam in respect. Surely, that scene surprised the rest of Mark's group. But Mark, Feng Jiruo, Elia, and Chemetris noticed something more than the eyes could see. Half-races. Mark voiced out. That is a village where the Lost Ones stayed, Silam explained. From time to time, humans would end up getting lost and entering this realm by mistake. Most of the time, we would help them return. However, there were those that ended up here after getting heavily injured. Some of them would stay until their recovery, while there were those that decided to stay after a certain particular reason. Falling in love, is it? Mark asked, and Silam nodded. We do not condemn love between different races, and if it happened, we would allow them to stay within some rules. Silam responded. After passing by the village of the Lost Ones, the hike took several more hours. With nature paving the way, it was a rather comfortable hike. And soon, they reached the summit of Mount Madia as. Reaching this part, it became easier to determine how limited this realm was. Although there was a horizon, it seemed to be fogged and the whole place felt even more isolated. It was a world the size of a mountain. This was the most accurate description of the surroundings they could see. Reaching the summit, the army of magical races did not follow closely. Instead, they all stood at the distance, waiting for something. Silam. Magwayan called. Yes, mother, Silam responded with a nod, stepped forward, and turned towards Mark and his group. Do not come too close. Mark and the others had no problem with that. They even took a step back to watch what would happen. And there, Silam closed her eyes, uttering lines that even those that could speak spirit language would not understand. It was a strange feeling hearing her voice. They could hear it but not at the same time. This is the language of our world. Magwayan stood beside Mark and explained. So, this is how to open the passage? Mark asked the goddess of the underworld. I remember you did not expect to see her still alive. Then how would we open the passage if she was not here? That was right. Magwayan gave the clue without expecting that Silam was alive. So, how did Magwayan expect Mark and his group to open the passage to Kahilwayan? And that question made Magwayan smile. Then there is me, Magwayan answered. Although this is not my real body, I can still feel the surroundings around it. For you who had many kinds of energy in your body, I expected you to find a way to call me once more. And I am right. The timing was a little off, but you did manage to connect me to this world once more. Mark stared at the Visayan goddess of the underworld, annoyed. It seemed that aside from Silam being alive, everything that happened so far was within her grasp. Surely, one should not underestimate a god. Silam continued her chant while the sun in the sky reached its position at noon. And there, the surroundings were enveloped in blinding light. The magical races kneeled down, eyes closed. Mark's group, however, could only cover their eyes in a hurry. It did not take long, and the light vanished. And at the moment Mark and the others opened their eyes, they were surprised. The sky was not empty anymore. Above the thick clouds, floating land could be seen. Tall structures could be seen from afar. And in front of everything were the gates of Kahilwayan that were mentioned in the Visayan myths. Day 207 AAA Mountain Peak, Secret Realm, Mount Madia as, Panay Mountain Range, Province of Aklan. After a few thousand years, the passage to Kahilwayan was opened for the first time. The splendor of its gates was witnessed by the descendants of the unfortunate ancestors. The army of magical races stared at the kingdom in the sky with excitement in their eyes. Nonetheless, none dared to raise their bodies from their current kneeling posture. The gods of the past might have already been gone. However, their faith and respect, their devotion towards those gods, remained unyielding for generations. It was unfortunate, however. These devoted creatures could only see its gates and the clouds underneath their god's kingdom. After all, not just anyone could step through its gates. That aside, it made the atmosphere a bit awkward. After all, the army knelt on their knees while the group of strangers stood behind Silam and Magwayan like it was nothing important. What now? Mark spoke, not minding the atmosphere behind them. The nonchalant attitude Mark had aside, his question was on point. After Silam recited the hymn, the blinding light revealed the location of Kahilwayan. However, as it was an abode of the Visayan gods, calling the procedure, opening the passage, was definitely not just was what it was called. Magwayan looked at Mark with a smile, understanding what he meant. They did say that they would open the passage, but no such passage could be seen, and instead, the gates of Kahilwayan were there for everyone to see. One would easily think that they could just fly towards the gates this way. However, as Mark thought, it was not that easy. With Magwayan giving Silam the signal, the latter recited a few more words of the hymn. Those words echoed into everyone's ears, and finally, the final part of opening the passage ended with a mirage opening in front of them at the edge of the mountain peak. So, this is the actual passage, Mark said as he stared at the blurry mirage reflecting the distorted image of the gigantic gates up in the sky. It seemed that you did not take our words as it was, which is a good thing, Magwayan spoke. Although we can see the gates of Kahilwayan and seem close enough to fly, it is not. Flying will not take anyone there, not even a single step closer. They will be stuck, and the only way is to return here. Not just anyone can enter Kahilwayan in any way they thought to use unless it is a way allowed by its king. Furthermore, reaching it is one thing, but entering the gates is another. Not just anyone could enter Kahilwayan. It meant that it was a place that was supposed to be impenetrable with many layers of restrictions and defenses. Even in the myths, the only ones that were able to attack Kahilwayan were the supreme sky god's grandchildren. It might be because while they had the authority to reach Kahilwayan, it seemed that they were not allowed to enter the gates without permission. Or else, the myth would not end up as what the people knew today. Mother, we should make haste, Silam said, looking at Mark and Magwayan. The passage would not stay open for too long. Right, we should. Magwayan nodded in agreement. With Silam in the lead, they entered the passage, vanishing into the mirage. Spera gagged as they stepped out on the other side of the mirage. Now, they stood outside the gates, although they just entered the mirage just a second ago. This is worse than my portal, Spera complained in a loud voice. She was the weakest in the group physically and was the one impacted the most by the side effects of the mirage. Entering the mirage was a nauseating experience. It was different from Spera's portal, which connected 2 points in space. Here, the mirage seemed to be a distortion in space, forcefully connecting 2 locations without regard for safety. If it was like this, there was no way any regular human would be able to pass through it without vomiting. And vomiting outside the gates would be a grave disrespect and would revoke those people's opportunity for entry. It seemed that all of you held well. Magwayan's voice echoed in everyone's dizzy ears. She had a playful expression on her face. There was no way she did not know of this, yet she did not warn Mark and his group. Mark stared at Magwayan in annoyance. He could not help but raise his hand, showing the mark of the king. You know that I can also remove the energy from this thing, yes? Mark warned seriously. You better not do something like that, Magwayan shrugged, without even a shred of apology in her face. You will need a guide inside. Before Mark could turn to Silam, Magwayan continued. Silam had the authority to open the passage at most. Entry is a different matter. Even I had no right to step into the abode of the supreme sky god. Silam added. This made Mark even more annoyed. It meant that no matter what happened, they would need Magwayan's help to enter the Kahilwayan. In the first place, without Magwayan, it was already questionable if they would be able to enter the secret realm of Mount Madia as peacefully, not to mention opening the passage. In any case, they finally reached their destination, the Kahilwayan. Opening the gates would still fall onto Magwayan's hands, however. Shemetris, can you try opening the gates by force? Mark asked Shemetris. After all, he was a chimera, made to contend against gods. Now, it was Magwayan who looked at Mark in annoyance. What you are doing is futile. I just want to try, Mark replied. There's nothing to lose even if he failed. Okay. I'll give it a push. Shemetris agreed. Even he seemed annoyed at the fact that they were being played by Magwayan. Looking at the gates, it sure was gigantic. It was probably around 40 to 50 meters, and its walls were the same. One would think that this was actually an abode of giants. Well, some tales told that gods were titans or gigantic beings. There were even gods, who were literal giants. While Chimethris approached the gates, Mark had the chance to observe it. Aside from the gates seemingly made of some sort of unknown steel or concrete, it did not look anything special. Even the walls seemed to be made of large river stones stacked together and fixed with some sort of adhesive. Yet, the structure felt impenetrable and indestructible. There even seemed to be a distortion of space above and around the place, making the gigantic gates the only way in and out. Looking behind them, the mirage was still there. But what Mark noticed was that the ground below, the peak of the mountain, was way farther than they saw initially. It really seemed that what they could see earlier was nothing but an illusion. Bam! A loud sound startled everyone the moment Chimethris planted his palms on the gigantic gates. It was not that Chimethris hit the gates on purpose, but it seemed that there was some resistance on the gates. It made him force his strength onto it. Finally, it seemed that Chimethris was enveloped by an invisible force that caused the air to tremble. It might be a defense mechanism placed on the gates, preventing people from pushing them open. But Chimethris had a pride of his own. And given that his forte was his fortitude and endurance, this kind of force would not stop him. Boom! The air trembled even more, as the clash between the strength of Chimethris and the force defending the door ensued. Even Mark and Silam, the strongest people here, aside from Chimethris, could not help but step back and defend themselves from the scattering force. Bam! 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 The air continued to tremble, and the ground started to shake. Mark could only step in front of his group, using the energy from his crystals to protect them. And after a few seconds of struggle, Magwayen's eyes dilated in surprise. Creak! Slowly, the heavy gates began to move. Chimethris was not only enduring the invisible force but was actually able to push the gates that even most gods could not open forcefully. Boom! Boom! The tremble became stronger the moment a gap between the gates opened. But with the last push that contained all his strength, bam! Chimethris forced the gates open entirely. Magwayen and Silam trembled at this sight. The sacred gates were forcefully opened. It was not even someone in the realm of gods that did it. There was no need to even mention the realm of gods, as the person was not even a deity. Looks like he managed to open it, Mark said. He might not say anything else, but he definitely meant that they opened it without Magwayen's help. Just what in the world is he? Magwayen snapped and asked Mark. There was neither anger nor discontent that the gates were forcefully opened. Instead, there was only curiosity at something they did not expect. Seeing that they actually failed to annoy Magwayen this way, Mark sighed. It seemed that whether they were playing in her hands or not was not a matter of importance to her. In any case, there was no need to hide Chimethris's background. A human-created weapon to fight against gods, Mark answered truthfully. He might have lost to gods in the past, but they failed to destroy him. And now, he managed to revive with the help of his lover. Mark pointed at Elia. An entity from the era of gods, the same as me. Silam said, having a bit of surprise and joy in her tone. The people from that era that was still alive were very sparse in number. It was even considered luck for the people of that era to meet nowadays. Now, there were actually two of them in front of her. Of course, Magwayen herself was a god of that era, yet she was not really here, but an avatar created from the artifact. To think that a human managed to create such a powerful being. Magwayen stared at Chimethris with interest. Aren't we going to enter? Chimethris said as he returned. Elia immediately hugged him, proud of his strength. We should. Magwayen replied to Chimethris, now speaking to him with acknowledgement in her tone. Then, Mother, Silam voiced out in sadness, I will return. Do not be sad, my child, Magwayen spoke. Unfortunately, her avatar could not touch anything, or she might put Silam in her embrace. This would not be our last farewell. Yes, Mother. Silam replied with the rare smile she never showed anyone. The group finally entered the gates. Unexpectedly, after the gates were opened fully, The invisible force vanished entirely. They passed through the gates without any problem. Silam stood outside the gates, watching until the group vanished from her sight. And then, the gates closed on their own, giving Silam the signal to return to the peak of Mount Madia as. Walking after a few minutes, they all saw what lay inside. However, none of them expected the scene. If one was to say, kingdom in the sky, one would think of a grandiose place with a castle surrounded by clouds. Not to mention that it was an abode made by the gods of the past. What lay in front of them, however, was an empty village. The huts made of wood with overgrown vines were the center of the largest floating island. Trees surrounded the area, and not just some regular trees. Many of them appeared to be magical, with leaves that shimmer like crystals and trunks as sturdy as steel. A forest village in the sky, it was the most accurate description of the place. The only different thing was the mountain further back. It had long winding stone stairs leading to what seemed to be a wooden mansion on its top. It made Mark remember. Even Bathala was living in a shabby shack, was he not? In the first place, the ancient gods of this country were portrayed to exhibit a tribal culture. Then, it should not be surprising that the true appearance of Kahilwayan was this. That would be your destination, Magwayan said, pointing at the very same mansion atop the small mountain. Da y minus 3174 to 1 AAM. Ka e ida sta e una vea sa tai. Ba ra e ga ka e ns roa era aa. Ba e o chia y. Proa ina e of ava te. RK. Arc. Dude. Wake up. Woken up by a rather hard shake of his shoulder, Mark raised his head slumped on his desk. With his blurred vision returning, Mark looked forward. In front of him was a pair of large whiteboards with one filled with the basic codes of the C++ programming language. Mark stared at the familiar yet unfamiliar sight, confused. He felt he slept for too long and had a very long dream. Dude, are you okay? The familiar voice entered Mark's ears, making him remember that he was woken up by someone. Looking to his right, Mark saw the woman 9 months older than him who he looked up to like his older sister, though she definitely did not know of it. She was the one who influenced him about otaku culture the most ever since a year ago. Why are you staring at me like that? Are you still asleep? Is your head still hurting? The woman asked Mark. No, I'm fine. Mark tried to say that he was fine, only to feel half of his head throbbing in pain. Looks like you're still not, the woman said with a sigh. Luckily, Sir Arnold is understanding. You fell asleep after lunch. Sir Arnold let you sleep through his class when we said you have an awful headache. I woke you up since class is over. Class? Mark asked, finally looking around. The white-walled classroom and people wearing school uniforms were what his eyes saw. What's wrong with you, dude? Did your headache damage your brain or something? The woman asked, looking at Mark in confusion. Is something wrong? You two don't want to go home yet? A man approached the two and asked since they were still sitting on their chairs. Your head still hurting? Mark was really confused, but then, he did not understand where the confusion was coming from. Did you have a bad dream? You're sleeping rather deeply. The man asked, seeing Mark's strange look. Dream? Mark murmured. It seems I did. A very long one. Ho? What dream? The woman asked in curiosity. I don't really remember, it just felt like it. Mark replied. Hey. What a bummer. I must be something interesting if it can make you act like that. The woman said with a pout of her slightly chubby cheeks. Karen. Markran. Mark. A man with short curled hair called from the door. You three not going home yet? Wanna hang out in the internet cafe? Sorry, Mar. Mark's not feeling well, so well pass. Karen replied. I see, then I'll head out first. Mar said before storming off with a short goodbye. Slowly, the people inside the classroom thinned out, with most of their classmates beginning to go home. Their college course was the one with the least number of students, in the first place. And since the school was only open for 2 years, The number of students in the whole college was not comparable to others. Can you go home properly? You're going to walk home as always, right? Karen asked Mark. If you want to, we can escort you at least at the Queen's Row gates. If your house is not too far away, we might escort you all the way. Markran proposed. Mark stared at the two with a strange expression. Don't be such worrywarts. I didn't know you two are like this, Mark said, picking up his recycled laptop bag as his school bag and standing up. I can handle myself. In the worst case, I can just stop at the tricycle terminal in Camella and wait for my father. You two also have other things to do, right? And Karen, you'll get scolded by your mom again if you went home late. I'm always getting scolded by Mudra, anyway, but if you say so, it also works. Karen nodded in agreement. Well, okay. Markran also compromised. I also have to go home early to man my aunt's internet cafe. With the three of them the only ones left inside the classroom, they left. Mark walked through the familiar hallway, with Karen and Markran accompanying him on both sides. Walking out of the gates, the two said their farewells. We'll go the opposite way, Markran said. Go home straight, all right? Be careful on the way home. Karen also chimed in. Why yeah. You two also. Mark responded awkwardly, not knowing how to reply to their worried words. The two waved their hands as Mark responded with his own, watching the two as they went the opposite road outside the gates of the college. Mark watched his two friends vanish from his eyes as they turned into the corner of the main road. He then turned to the gates of the college, observing it, not minding that he was in the middle of the road and was obstructing the students going out of the gates. Fortunately, none of the students bothered Mark, who was behaving weirdly. Hey, Mark, what are you doing there? A boisterous voice entered Mark's ears, making him look at the fishball stall nearby. In front of the stall, a few of Mark's male classmates were eating with a rather tall but heavy man in the lead. That very same man was also the one that called Mark. Mark approached the group. He was very familiar with them. After all, he was also kind of a lackey of this tall man. My head is just aching, Glenn, Mark said to the tall man. Oh, right. You even slept through Sir Arnold's class. Glenn nodded. Want some fishball? My treat as always. Mark stared at Glenn and his other classmates. As always, Glenn was treating them with food. He was a pretty rich guy in the class, after all. Next time, Mark shook his head. I'll head home and rest. If you say so. Glenn replied before bidding farewell to Mark, who began to walk away. Their other classmates did the same. Leaving the school, Mark traversed the familiar road. There was no way that he would not be familiar with it. He had been walking through the same path since he was 7 every single weekday after class. After all, his preschool, kinder, elementary school, high school, and college were technically in the same block. Going to school, his father would always bring him, but when going home, he always had to walk depending on the situation. When he was little, it was just a bicycle cab. After he reached the 3rd grade in elementary school, they managed to afford the down payment for a tricycle, although it took years to pay. While walking through the streets filled with people, the sky began to darken. However, Mark did not realize as he was walking blankly. His mind was elsewhere. Mark was sure he dreamt of something. However, he could not recall it. Not even a single detail of it. Although not a vivid dreamer, Mark could recall dreams if he knew he had one. However, he could not recall it at all. Even so, he could only try to recall as he felt that it was somehow important. He continued to walk blankly, not realizing he arrived at his destination. Was it his house? No, it was a wall. Their family was a caretaker of this private land since he was 5 years old. At first, there was only a barbed wire fence encircling the private land. However, the adjacent land was bought and turned into private suburbs. The private land they cared for was isolated and walled off. Because of that, if Mark's family wanted to go in and out of the land they lived in, they had to climb over this wall. It was inconvenient. Fortunately, they were allowed to do so by the homeowners association without problems. It was not like there were no other ways out of the private land. However, aside from this wall, the others would lead them out, adding more than half an hour of walking for Mark. And the furthest one actually leads to a different municipality, since it was at the border of Bakor City. Climbing on the wall, the grass-filled land was the only thing Mark could see. The tall bladed grass that was taller than him blocked the view the moment he jumped down. It was already nighttime. Walking in a tight path surrounded by nothing but tall grass was something scary than serene. In a minute or two, Mark reached their house. A concrete house with windows blocked off by rusty metal sheets. It was a house that did not even have a ceiling. This house was not actually something they built. It was already here way before they came to this land. Mark approached their yard. The barking of the dogs ensued. They were living in the middle of nowhere. Having dogs was a must for their family. Who knows who would sneak into this place in the middle of the night, after all? Still, who would have more than 10 dogs? Even Mark thought that it was too many. However, it was hard to find anyone who would adopt puppies without imported breeds, and they had no choice but to raise those that remained. Mark had no choice but to pacify the dogs, as their barking made his head hurt even more. Approaching the door, Mark realized that there was no one home. They probably went out, Mark murmured, and he tried to feel his pocket to check the time. He then froze. What am I thinking? I don't have a watch, not even a phone. Second year college and did not even have a phone. I'm probably the only one in the entire school. Mark sighed. I wonder if they already replaced the batteries on the wall clock. With those words, Mark twisted the knob of the door hard. With a click, the lock was undone and he opened it without problems. We should really replace this doorknob. Its lock had been broken for years already. That is if we had money to buy one. Mark entered the door. The front door immediately leads to the kitchen. It was not like they designed it. It was already like this when they occupied this house. It had another door which could actually be the right front door. However, it had a smelly canal in front of it and was not fit to pass through every time. This house sure had a poorly thought design. Putting his things down, Mark sat down on the monoblock long chair in the living room. The living room was quite empty. The only valuable thing here was their cheap colored TV that was already several years old and the DVD player that they bought when he was in first year high school. Looking at the wall clock, Mark sighed. It was still stuck at 6. The time this morning when it stopped ticking. Mark stood up and turned on the TV. The TV was an old one, after all. It was a model without a remote. The tune entered Mark's ears. He was in time for the start of the newscast. There, he saw the time at the bottom left corner of the screen. It was a few minutes past 6:30 in the evening. Michael's class will end in 8, so they probably won't be back until 9. As usual, we will have a late dinner. Mark complained. My head hurts. I want to sleep. But I better cook some rice first if I don't want to be scolded. With another sigh, while rubbing his temple, Mark went to the kitchen and washed a few cups of rice. Picking up the charcoal-covered pot, Mark went outside. They did not have a stove or could afford to buy one. Thus, their family cooked outside using the firewood they procured from the woody areas of this private land. Sometimes, they would buy trashed coconut shells. It was way cheaper than an LPG tank, after all. Right. I should change my clothes first. I only have 2 polos for the whole week. Putting down the pot, Mark went into one of the 2 rooms of the house. He took off his clothes and donned his old house clothing. The shirt had a few holes, but it did not bother Mark. He was used to wearing this one. After all, most of his casual clothing were hand-downs from the friends of his father that were about to be thrown away. Mark successfully cooked the pot of rice, though its bottom was a bit burnt. He then fell asleep immediately after cooking. The next day, Mark's life continued on. His daily routine as a college student started around 5:30 in the morning. His daily schedule differed depending on the day of the week. Nonetheless, his earliest classes at school started at either 7 or 8 in the morning. Waking up early in the morning was a hassle to Mark today, however. It seemed that his headache had yet to subside. And for some reason, the usual medicine for headaches was not working on him this time around. The most that the medicine he took did was to lessen the pain a little. Mark already had the idea to skip today's class. However, since one of today's subjects included their thesis preparations before its start in the next semester, he could not just skip. And worst of all, it was the last subject of the day. After having a cup of coffee and a few pieces of pandesal, Mark and his father left the house with everyone still asleep. The classes of Mark's siblings were still at noon, so only Mark and his father had to wake up early this whole school year. Mark went on, following what his daily routines should be. Half listening to the instructors in class, not putting much effort into everything. Why? Because he found this life of his as something unnecessarily tedious. Nothing really drives Mark to have the motivation to do so. Every single day was just a fleeting scenario in his eyes, to be forgotten when the next day arrived. The only things that still gave him life in this boring world were the occurrences of man-made worlds for the bored people to enjoy and explore. These worlds were works of fiction, computer games, anime, manga, and novels. That was why it would be no surprise if one would see Mark lurking in internet cafes, either playing or watching others play games. With his 20 pesos daily allowance, 75% of it would go to an hour of playing games a day. What about his lunch then? Unfortunately, it was a pretty foreign thing in Mark's daily schedule. Even if he did not play games, his daily allowance would go to photocopies needed for their lessons. Most of the time, there would not be enough left for Mark to buy food with his allowance. In the first place, 20 pesos was never enough to buy even a small plate of food in the school cafeteria. Time passed. Mark became tired of his daily routines. Well, he was always tired of it. It was just there was nothing much he could do to change it. However, the change in Mark's outlook was too abrupt and confusing. It was because Mark never found the reason for this sudden change. It started to Mark having less and less time he spent around internet cafes. Even if Glenn and the gang treated him a session of an hour or two, Mark would rarely come with them. The instances became rarer and rarer that they slowly began to not ask Mark anymore. Nonetheless, no one was ignoring Mark. The more he changed, his grades rose. For some unknown reason, Mark began to understand the lessons as if he was already familiar with them. He had the feeling of déjà vu. This feeling was not new to Mark. He had dreams before where he saw small things he would encounter in the future. Normally, it would just be seeing unfamiliar places that he would find himself lurking in the future. When the feeling of déjà vu hit him, he would remember the dream and piece the puzzle. But in his current state, Mark could not remember any dream at all. It was extremely strange, yet a welcome change. The sports season came. Everyone was quite excited. It was near the time when several all Cavite State University branches would gather at the main campus in Indang, Cavite, for a week-long sports festival. The players from each campus would compete with each other and try to bring glory to their beloved alma mater. This season was the best for those with low academic prowess but high athletic skills. Participating in the competition would guarantee them a passing grade for the semester. It was also why those who were not that sports savvy would also try to participate. It was even if they would just end up as benched players. In the past, Mark was also interested in this. After all, it would be his actual first sports festival. Furthermore, one of the games would be soccer. One of the sports that Mark was the most interested in. But, for some reason, Mark refrained to apply and join. Something was telling him not to. The feeling of déjà vu struck him again. It was as if he participated in something like this in the past, and for some reason. The feeling of failure lingered in his heart for no reason. Even so, Mark tried to gather information in the least. The requirements to join and the things needed by the players. It was something that Mark would not do in the past. However, the irking feeling in him compelled him to do so. And it dawned unto Mark. Since the school was new, they did not have the budget to provide every piece of equipment needed by the players. They would have the general sports equipment such as balls and goalposts. But as for something personal like spike shoes, they could not. The players needed to provide their own. And Mark was sure. There was no way he would be able to afford those. His family barely had enough extra money for their daily needs. His father's earnings as a tricycle driver were just enough to put food on their non-existent table and save up for the monthly bills. There was absolutely no way for his family to afford a pair of spike shoes, not to mention that Mark would only use them for a short time. Mark gave up, and instead, focused on his studies. Nonetheless, he would pass by and watch the soccer players practice with some sort of confusing nostalgia in his mind. What Mark was doing was strange, even for himself. In the past, he was sure that he would blindly go chase something he liked to do without thinking about the consequences. Mark was that childish. Nonetheless, realizing he was childish was strange enough since it happened for no reason. Mark's days as a second-year college student ended. He became a third-year student with flying colors. And unexpectedly, although it was a bit late, the sudden spike in his academic performance caused the college dean to recommend him for a scholarship. It was something unprecedented since scholarships should only be bestowed on new students. However, the dean pushed it after learning that he was struggling financially. Of course, there was no way Mark would disagree with that, and because of this, the burden of his tuition on his family was gone. It was a welcome surprise for the family, and they actually celebrated it. Mark's dull relationship with his family was getting better. And the best change in Mark of all. The improvement of Mark's life began to increase his self-confidence, something that was practically non-existent in the past. The only thing that was keeping Mark from breaking down was his childishness. It was a shell that shielded him. An aspect that kept him going in this boring world. But, of course, it was also a shackle that hindered his growth, both mentally and physically. And with things finally locking in the correct places, Mark's life became better. Mark's days as a third-year college student did not start without other unexpected events in school. It seemed that there were 3 sisters that enrolled as first years, with 2 of them being quite popular among the students. By what it looked like, those 2 cosplayers. They were not that popular among the cosplay community, but they sure had the experience. Mark felt a bit interested. He was quite an otaku, after all. Not to mention that Karen, Mark's best and worst influence, was a member of that community. However, it never occurred to Mark to actually interact with those people. His self-confidence might have been boosted, but old ways would not change that easily. It was until the main event of the year came. The once-a-year acquaintance party. Due to the existence of cosplayers in the school, the theme of the party this year was shifted in their favor. It was also a new thing to common people and surely was an interesting topic. A cosplay competition, complete with the skit and other things, was planned for the party. And of course, Karen dragged Mark and Markren into the fray. It was not wrong to say that Mark was excited. Even if he was dragged in, it would be his first time cosplaying. As for Markren, he had gone to cosplay conventions before and had enough knowledge to participate. Mark told his parents what was happening in school. They were not against it as could be a good experience for him. Besides, he had done better in the past few months. Mark deserved a reward of some sort. The acquaintance party was still a month away, however, the preparations were already ongoing. Mark's mother took charge of his clothes for the competition. On the other hand, Mark had to deal with the other props. And because Mark got a scholarship this school year, they actually had some extra budget to spare. The skits for the party had to be rehearsed, and there was also the display and catwalk. Although not that unexpected, Mark met the talk of the school, the cosplayer sisters, Elsa and Charmaine. There were also other unusual people among the contestants of the cosplay competition. One was Carlo, the grandson of a popular fast food chain. Another was quite an energetic woman. She was Mark's complete opposite. Mark was an introvert, silent, and mostly avoid attention. She was an extrovert, noisy, and attention-seeker. Height-wise, they were also the opposite. Mark was on the tall side while she was rather short. Appearance-wise, Mark was below average, while she was above. Most of all, Mark was a Mark Anthony, she was a Mary Antoinette. Even the other people present could not help but notice the funny coincidence. What Mark did not expect, however, these people he did not even know of him. How? Mark could not understand. However, after talking with Carlo, Elsa, and Charmaine, it seemed that he was quite a topic among the school instructors. A weird guy who was barely passing in his first and second years was now among the top students in his class. It seemed that his unexpected improvement garnered some attention, making the instructors tell the younger students to follow his steps. Things sure had changed for better or for worse. It was making Mark feel uncomfortable. One day, the music to be used in the skit and catwalk was shown to them. Carlo found that the music on his catwalk part was rather long. However, they could not just edit and cut it off abruptly since it would make the transition sound too off. Unfortunately, Carlo was the only person cosplaying for the anime he was aiming for. Thus, his part was unnecessarily wrong. Looking up to Mark, Carlo asked if they could make a small battle skit. It would work since both their characters were battle types. Furthermore, Carlo's character was a protagonist, while Mark's was an antagonist. Mark did not mind. However, Mark insisted on a proper choreographed fight for some reason he also did not understand. And the two practiced on their own. Carlo wielded a stick like a sword, while Mark was barehanded. It was because Carlo's character was a Shinigami, while Mark's was a masked blue flame user. What made Carlo confused was that Mark wore some gadget on his hand, with tubes and what seemed to be a canister. What is that? Of course, Carlo would ask. It was until Mark began to spurt blue flames from his hand that his eyes turned wide. Props. Mark replied. He did not really know what urged him to make something this elaborate, but he just made it after experimenting and searching things on the internet. Carlo was amused, asking Mark to improve his props too. However, it was the least of their concern as they began practicing. Then, an accident happened. Carlo stepped on a pebble and lost balance mid his attack. However, his hand holding the stick was about to stab Mark in the face. It was an accident, and it happened fast. There was no way for the two to react. Or at least, should have been. Mark blanked out as he saw the point of the stick approaching his face. And then, his body moved on its own. Faster than the two could perceive. Mark bent his body backward, avoiding the stick before he made a few backflips, taking some distance away from Carlo. Carlo fell to the ground. He did not feel the pain, as he stared at Mark in surprise. Nonetheless, the person in question, Mark, was also shocked. Just what in the world happened? The sudden event that avoided the accident sure surprised Mark and Carlo. They even forgot the severity of the situation. If Mark was unable to avoid Carlo's stick, who knows what kind of injury would Mark incur? Mark could have gotten an awful bruise under his eye, and that would not be the worst thing that could happen. Even so, the possibility of Mark getting injured just now passed their minds. While Carlo did apologize despite it being an accident with no one at fault, the topic immediately turned to Mark's unexpected response. Mark was surprised, but the desire burned more. He never knew that he would be able to do this kind of stuff. In the first place, Mark never really tried it before, fearing that he would end up unnecessarily injuring himself. After all, he definitely lacked practice and training. And while his actions could be the result of his adrenaline pumping to respond to the accident, he indeed did it. As such, Mark decided to try it a few times. The fear of getting injured was now erased from his mind. He fell several times as he tried. However, out of his 10 tries, he actually succeeded in doing a backflip 4 times. It was such an amazing feat for Mark, who did not have any kind of practice in this kind of stuff. Furthermore, Mark found an issue. It was his stamina. His stamina was severely lacking to perform a stable backflip. What he did earlier was nothing but a fluke. But with Mark having enough self-confidence, he decided to include this stuff in his skit with Carlo. Of course, Mark decided to have some training for himself. He did not want to end up embarrassing himself in front of many people when the day of the event arrived. A few weeks passed. The day that everyone prepared for arrived. Mark's and Carlo's secret skit brought results that the two did not expect. In the first place, the costumes of the two were of top quality. It was the same for their props despite being handmade. Carlo made a rubber and wood sword initially, but with Mark's help, the flimsy made sword was now a large kitchen knife-shaped sword created from scrap metal sheets instead. In the anime, the thin sword of this Grim Reaper was more powerful. However, the sword's original form, which was gigantic, had more impact on the eyes of those who did not watch the anime. As for Mark, his red robe was already eye-catching, complementing his silver-colored mask. His act caught the eyes of the audience more when he began spewing blue flames from his right hand. It was unfortunate that there was no way to actually shape the flames. In the anime, the character's flames had the shape of either a winged woman or a blue phoenix. Even so, the two already stood out among the rest just by showing off their costumes. It stepped up another level. The two began fighting during the unnecessarily long catwalk music during Carlo's portion after Mark invaded it. The two fought, executing some acrobatic moves, which made the audience yell in excitement. It ended with the red-robed ninja abruptly exiting the stage and the black-robed Grim Reaper chasing after him. This contest was supposed to end with just one winner for each gender category. It was a small school contest, after all. However, because of the amazing performance of Mark and Carlo, the judges decided to ramp it to the top 3 in each gender category instead. Mark, Carlo, and Markran won the top 3 for men, while Karen, Elsa, and Charmaine won for the women. It was not a surprising result. In the first place, only the 6 of them had the most dealing with the otaku culture among the contestants. The acquaintance party of this year became a good memory for everyone. With the festivities done, the hardest part of college life ensued. The years where the older students had to dabble with their thesis. For this hurdle, Mark grouped up with Karen, Markran, and one of their closest friends, Saime. Because of Mark's increase in his academic performance, he sure was in demand. Unfortunately, Mark insisted on staying with his friends, in which even the instructors had no way of convincing him. At first, the instructors tried to balance the groups. After all, there were weaker groups. They needed a pillar to get a fighting chance and pass. But most of the time, the one that became the pillar of that group would end up doing everything for that group. Mark understood that fact, and if the instructors forced him, he said that he would rather work on his own instead. Of course, it received bad reactions among their class. It was as if Mark was being selfish. However, Mark, for some reason, was uncompromising. However, shouldering the expenses alone would cause Mark a great amount of trouble. Even if Mark managed to do it on his own, he would definitely fail on the financial side. It would not be a good thing for the school if a good scholarship student failed. Furthermore, the reason was the instructor forcing the student to do things he did not want. In the end, Mark got what he wanted. As students of the computer science course, they were given a few choices to choose from for their thesis. Creating a video game was one, and Mark and Markran immediately jumped for it. Their first hurdle would be their thesis title defense. Thus, they needed to make a few proposals for the defense, picking a few categories and plans. Since it was not the time to work tightly together, the 4 of them decided to create their own proposals. Karen and Saime decided to propose some sort of database software. It was basic but rather complicated. Markran chose a proposal for a first-person shooter game. It involved military stuff, and of course, shooting people. Mark, on the other hand, focused on a horror puzzle adventure game, and something with a pretty unique setting. Their thesis proposals were going smoothly. It was until an unexpected hurdle came. At their title defense, a guest panel was invited. A terror professor from another college. The old professor seemed to be a friend of the dean. But that was not the worst thing. Many title defenses failed on the first day. It was because that guest panel put unreasonable remarks on what seemed to be reasonable proposals. Even the instructors were feeling troubled, due to the unexpected result. It seemed that they did not know about the guest at all. On the third day of the title defense, it was the turn of Mark's group. They prepared a whole lot. Karen even took out quite an amount of money for the food of the panels. But the moment they stepped inside, without even speaking a single word, the guest panel said that they failed. It was unreasonable that even the two instructors that were part of the panel were appalled. Karen tried to appeal, asking what was wrong. Apparently, many other groups already proposed database software. It was out of the question anymore. Furthermore, the proposal for it did not include any specific recipient at all for the sampling process. And as the guest panel did not seem to be keen on mentioning the two video game proposals, Karen brought the topic immediately. Then, the guest panel agitatedly dumped the printed copies of the two proposals on the table. She began mentioning violence included within the games and even saying about the game maker they decided to use. The guest panel reasoned that the game should be created by the students and not just some drag-and-drop ready-made thing. And the same with the database software. It lacked specific recipients for the survey and sampling. There was silence in the room. Among the students, only their group proposed to create a video game. It was among the categories given, after all. The two instructors in the panel were distraught too. The categories were given by them, after all. The silence, however, was broken in the most disrespectful way. PFFT. Mark stared at the guest panel, almost bursting out a loud laugh. Both the instructors were shocked at Mark's uncharacteristic behavior. Even his group members were the same. And surely, the guest panel was angry and started to complain to the instructors if they were teaching students like this. But when Mark spoke, the old hag was unable to refute. Mark exuded threatening pressure as he pointed out how the guest panel did not actually read his proposal for his game. With a threatening smile, Mark explained that not a single word that could be considered as active violence was in his proposal. The game he proposed was a horror puzzle adventure game. It was mainly a puzzle adventure game using the elements of horror as a time restraint for the player. Standing in front, Mark asked the two instructors to read his proposal. They had yet to read it since they were supposed to while listening to the defense. And the two were surprised how it was elaborately and professionally made. The details of the game were explained properly. And to top it all, it explained that the game maker was actually a game engine required for the game to run. While it did have default assets, those assets could not pass as a product at all, not to mention that the creator had to do all the coding himself. The two instructors looked at the guest panel in askance. The two were young and as such, following the more experienced guest panel for this defense. It seemed that the two decided to report what was happening to the dean. Who would have thought that the guest panel was not judging things properly? She did not even read the proposal and just said it was a fail. The guest panel tried to argue, but it was futile. Instead, the fact that an old hag like her had little to no knowledge about the video game industry came to light instead. Recipient. Sample. Why would a commercially designed game need to struggle about those? The game would have players worldwide. The survey could be done in-game too. And to finish it all, Mark showed everyone a demo trailer of his game. Yes, a demo trailer. It was what Mark invested on with his allowance, making this game while renting a PC in an internet cafe for a few months. Even the money he got as a prize from the cosplay event went into creating this thing. Everyone watched Mark's surprise video. The models might be outdated for a game of this generation. After all, Mark only gathered some free placeholder models. Nonetheless, the video showed the essence of the game. Elaborate puzzles, the background of the character's story, and the enemies chasing her. Violence? The character was not even programmed to fight back directly to the shadows chasing her. And if the character was caught, it was programmed to show a black background game over screen. Without even finishing the video projected in front, the guest panel stormed out of the room, red-faced. The old hag lost. She lost horribly. Her facade was broken by a student. No one knew what would be the repercussions of this event. However, everyone knew that Mark won this fight. In the first place, Mark would not mind if his proposal was rejected. In the least, give proper reasons and not just the pure ego and narrow mindset. After all, it was not new that many old people were not fond of video games, thinking it was the source of violence and other things that did not make any sense. The defense abruptly ended, and the other title defense for the rest of the day was cancelled. Mark was called into the dean's office and was scolded for his disrespectful conduct. However, that guest panel did not appear anymore on the next title defenses. From what it seemed, the two instructors reported the event truthfully, not to mention that the session was recorded in a video for documentation like all the other title defenses that happened. And the error also came to light. In the first place, that guest panel was a major of an entirely different field. She was not supposed to be a guest panel for a thesis defense of computer-related subjects as she had no knowledge of it. She was only called because of her connection to the dean and her title as a professor. In the end, the guest panel was replaced with someone younger but more suitable. The school had to spend more money to invite the new guest, but it was better and more reasonable for the students of the computer courses. The criteria for judging was also revised, differentiating the categories for each college courses. Mark's game was approved. Furthermore, the new panel was actually happy that there were students here wanting to tackle the video game industry. The new panel knew how poor the video game industry of this country was, after all. And the most important thing, Mark's name became more popular in the school. At first, he was just a student that changed for the better, and someone hiding his physical skills. Now, he was also being called the brave student that chased off the witch. It seemed that in the few days that the previous guest panel was in this school, she became hated by the entire student body.